You've been working on this project for months. You poured everything into it, your time, your energy, like all of your being. Then a client pushes back, or a launch doesn't land the way you expected, or someone gives you feedback that really stings. And suddenly you feel like you're all over the place. You can't think straight. You know, you need to make a decision, but every option feels personal. Every choice feels overwhelming. Instead of leaving, you're reacting.
That feeling that you're probably like, ooh, that's too close to home. That's the feeling we're going to be talking about today. When you're a solopreneur, everything in your business is tied to you in some way, your ideas, your reputation, your livelihood. So, of course, you're, invested emotionally in everything that has to do with building your business. And that's not a flaw. That's actually a part of what makes you good at what you do. You're passionate about it. But there is a line that when you cross it, the emotion starts running the show instead of just informing it. And that's when things get messy, when you can't separate the facts from the feelings.
And we're getting into what happens when emotional investment clouds your decision making. And more importantly, what you can do to step back and regulate and lead from clarity instead of just reaction. And if you've ever made a decision in the heat of a moment and regretted it later, because I know I've been there, and if you've ever held back from making a decision at all because everything felt too charged, keep listening. So there's a few things that we're going to cover today. Why emotional investment is a future, but only up to a point. How to recognize when you've crossed the line, and the 3 tools you can use in real time to get back to clear-headed leadership. And before we get into it, we have a free gift for you. This is our 20-minute clarity map. You'll learn how to pick 3 goals that will make the biggest impact, pair each goal with a soft skill to boost follow through, define simple, realistic actions you can actually complete, and stay consistent without burning out, because we all don't want to burn out. So instead of guessing what to focus on or trying to do it all at once, this tool is going to give you a clear, simple framework to cut through all that noise. So in 20 minutes, you'll have a plan that feels doable, values driven, and designed to move your business forward without burning out. So let's get into it.
You can now follow us on LinkedIn at Entrepreneur Encounter.
I want to kick this off by saying something that might feel or sound counterintuitive. Being emotionally invested in your business is a good thing. It means that you care about what happens in your business, with your clients, with your team members, if you have them. It means you're not just going through the motions day to day. And honestly, for creative entrepreneurs, people who built something from scratch, who put their personality and values into their work, that emotional connection is genuinely a big part of why clients are drawn to you in the first place. It's that story, it's that relationship like focus that is part of the product or service that you sell.
And I think we do entrepreneurs a disservice when we tell them to take emotion out of your business. That's not realistic, and it's not even a goal. I mean, I would rather be emotionally invested in my business than not. That this is what I've built. This is what you built, and you want to pour everything into it that you can. The goal is to understand when your emotions are giving you useful information and when they're distorting it. Think about it this way. If you feel uneasy about a client and that unease is telling you something's off, that's your emotional intelligence doing its job. You should pay attention to that. But if a client leaves a critical review and you immediately fire off a defensive response before you've had time to even process that, that's your emotional investment driving you somewhere you don't want to go.
So the question isn't, how do I stop feeling things about my business? The question really is, how do I know when my feelings are informing my decisions versus completely hijacking them. And that distinction is going to be everything.
So, how do we reframe this? Emotional investment becomes a problem not when it's present, but when it becomes the only voice in the room. That voice in your head is just getting louder and louder. So, how do you know when you've crossed the line? There are some really clear signals. The first one is speed. When you are too emotionally invested, your decision making speeds up, not because you have more clarity, but because the discomfort is too loud. You just want it to stop. So you just make those decisions right in the moment. You respond to that email immediately. You make that call before you slept on it. You say yes or no before you've even had a chance to sit back and take a breath and think about that decision.
Second signal is tunnel vision. When we're so emotionally flooded that we literally lose access to options and anything other than what it is that we're doing. It starts to feel like there's only one path forward. And it usually involves either fighting back or completely backing down, and the nuanced middle ground disappears. I've experienced this probably more times than I can count. A collaborator once gave me feedback on a project I'd invested a lot of time in. And in that moment, all I could see is the criticism or the ungratefulness. I couldn't access the part of me that knew this person was trying to help. I just went straight to defensive. I did end up taking a breath and saying, if you will send it, because it happened over text. And I was like, please send all this via email and I will respond there. And I was immediately defensive. Thankfully, I didn't share that via text message, but that small moment did allow me that time to breathe so that I could then go look at the email.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't take a step back and you don't breathe and don't think about it, if you are so defensive in that response, who knows what's going to happen, right? So you might lose a client. They might talk about that to somebody else, and then it's like this talk that you don't want to be spread. Just take a breath. Just make sure that you're in a space that will help you make that decision. The third signal is personalization. When everything starts to feel like it's about you, your worth, your value, your competence, rather than about the situation, that's a sign you're too deep in it. A client changing the scope isn't a personal attack. A failed launch isn't proof that you're not cut out for whatever you're launching. But when we're emotionally flooded, our brains start connecting the dots that aren't actually connected.
So to recap, the 3 signs you've crossed the line are you're moving too fast, you've lost access to options, and everything feels extremely personal. If you're experiencing any of those right now and something you're navigating in your business, keep listening because next we're talking about what to actually do. So taking action about it and tools that will help you find clarity.
So you've recognized you're in it. You're emotionally flooded. You need to make a decision, but you cannot think straight. What do you do? Tool number 1, you want to name that emotion that you're having. This sounds simple, but it's one of the most effective things that you can do in that moment. Before you respond, before you decide, before you do anything, name what you're actually feeling. Not I'm stressed. Get more specific. Is it fear? Is it embarrassment? Is it grief? Is it anger? When you name the emotion, you create a small but important distance between you and that feeling. You're not the emotion. You're the person experiencing that emotion. And that gap is where your decision making lives.
Tool number 2 is to buy yourself a buffer, similar to what I did with asking her to email it to me so I could respond, in the way that I like to respond to people. This one is so practical and probably underused. When you're emotionally activated, you do not have to respond immediately, even if it feels like you do. Create a personal policy that nothing gets sent or decided within the first hour of a strong emotional reaction.
Yeah.
Draft the email, write out the decision, but then step away and come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes. Like, go stand outside for 5 minutes. Go do something else away from your desk for just a few minutes. And you'd be amazed at how different a response looks after you've eaten lunch, taken a walk, or slept on it. If you have that much time, the buffer is not avoidance. That buffer is leadership. One thing that I like to do is I'll put the email or whatever it is into an AI tool, and this is how I'm actually feeling about it. What am I not seeing? Or something along those lines. It depends on what it is, but something along those lines, so that I have a neutral something to like psychoanalyze it and be like, this is what is actually happening. And so it does help me in a very silly way separate facts from feelings.
Mhm.
Like, this is what they're actually doing, and here's the game plan on how to do it. And I'm able to take my emotions out of it if I'm struggling to do so in the first place.
Yeah, and when you send that email, if you are in those emotions and you send that email, you have like a couple seconds to undo that send, because once it's sent, it is sent. Just like that text. So just take a step back and take a breather. Tool number 3, ask yourself the question that changes everything. When you're in it, your brain is focused on the threat, that the thing that's wrong, the thing that hurts, the thing that needs to be fixed right now. So you need to redirect it. The question is, what would I tell a trusted friend in this exact situation? You will tell your friend to take a breather. You will tell your friend to go outside and touch grass. Like, when you stop making it about yourself, your thinking clears up immediately. You gain the perspective and the empathy that was completely unavailable in that moment. It sounds too simple, but it works because it shifts you added that reactive brain into the part of you that actually knows how to lead.
And I want to add that these tools aren't about suppressing what you feel, because we would never, ever tell you to
No.
do that. They're about creating enough space between the feeling that maybe you can't even name right now and the response that you get to choose what happens next. That's really what emotional intelligence is about. It's not about unfeeling it. It's being the one who gets to decide what to do with that feeling as you're feeling it.
Let's make this really concrete, because I think the 3 tools sound great in theory, but let's talk about where they actually show up in day-to-day in your business. So here's a situation. A client gives you critical feedback about your work. In my early days, I probably would get too emotional and send something defensive, but obviously we learn as we grow. Your gut reaction might be to defend yourself, to over-explain, or to immediately start making changes just to make the discomfort stop. But instead, name that feeling. You're probably feeling embarrassed. You want to buy yourself that buffer before you respond. Ask yourself, what would I tell a friend here? So again, going back to those tools, like, how would you tell somebody how they should react to that feeling? I understand that getting critical feedback can suck at times. Essentially, it does. But we have to kind of reel it back and not take everything so personal.
Situation number 2 might be a little common as well. A launch doesn't perform the way that you hoped. When we're emotionally invested in any kind of launch, a bad result can feel catastrophic. You can feel like, oh my gosh, I have to revamp my entire product or service or community that I'm building. And maybe you think your whole business is on shaky ground. But when you name the emotion, and that could be anything from disappointment to embarrassment that it didn't work, especially if you're working with a team and this is your first launch, buy yourself a buffer before you make any big pivots, and ask, if you had a close friend that was going through this launch and doing something for the very first time, what would you tell them? What questions would you ask them? And the answer usually sounds a lot more reasonable. Look at the data. Did the numbers look really good leading up to it? And then maybe there was a technicality, like a tech fail or a glitch or something. And so people just weren't able to hop back in and you lost them temporarily. Talk to someone that you trust about it, and just don't blow up the whole strategy based on one result. Look and see where like the holes were, the gaps were, and tweak that one thing and then launch again.
Exactly. I never thought about really looking at the data until you and I had our L10 meetings and looking at the data for our podcast analytics, because obviously at the beginning we're like, we're not growing, we're not doing anything right. Like, what is going on? And, internally, it's almost like a fear because you're showing up online and you're like, well, I'm showing up. Why isn't this growing? But, looking at that data definitely helps a lot. Situation 3, a peer or somebody that you are collaborating with says something that lands wrong. This one is tricky because relationships are involved and the emotional stake feels higher. Obviously, when you are building relationships within your business, you want to hold on to them, but sometimes that can be a little difficult. But the tools work here too. Name what you felt, don't respond immediately, and before you assume the worst, ask yourself, is there any version of what they said wasn't meant what they really said? Like when you're communicating, or there might be misunderstandings. Most misunderstandings between people who are actually like each other get resolved by that question alone.
So here's what we want you to walk away with today. Being emotionally invested in your business is not the problem. It's actually one of the greatest strengths that you can have as a business owner. The work is learning how to recognize the moment when the investment shifts from fuel to foggy gray, and having a few simple tools to find your way back to clarity so that you can name it, create that buffer, reframe your response, and then that's the whole practice.
And the more you do it, it gets faster. The gap between the trigger and the response gets wider. And in that gap, that's where your best leadership lives. Thanks for spending time with us today. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a fellow entrepreneur who might need to hear it. And don't forget to grab that clarity map, which you can find down in the show notes. Until next time.
You can now follow us on LinkedIn at Entrepreneur Encounter.
Thanks for spending time with us today. If something in this episode gave you a fresh perspective, share it with a friend or send us a DM. We love hearing how these conversations land with you.
And if you're curious about how soft skills can support your next season of growth, we each have more resources to share.
You can find Dana on Instagram at danas.desk.nc for Pinterest strategy and intentional marketing.
And Sarah at UR for team development, business leadership, and podcast support.
Until next time, keep